Lionsden with Stephen Carr. We are here with John Ventre, who was a 2022 Lieutenant Governor candidate, and he is running again in 2026 for Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor. Same thing as he was in 2022. He also ran for his county commissioner and almost made it as well. We're going to be asking him some questions, get into why he should be the candidate for lieutenant governor with Stacey Garrity, and we'll talk about his campaign and some deep city issues, what his topics are, and his platform is, and the 2026 race, and whatever comes to mind. Why don't you give us a background about yourself, John?
Yeah, I'm retired. I was an executive at UPS for 26 of my 35 years. And, I had a lot of hats there. But the main thing I was for most of my career, or the whole time I was an executive, I was the state level security director, multi-state level. I had Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Virginia. But I also had the crisis management team. I had claims, and I had public affairs. I had a group of 22 executives at UPS that I ran that group. We would meet with 22 federal senators and congressmen. So I did the public affairs. And that's why I want to run, for an office in the state or locally, because it's in your blood, just like the security work was in my blood. But, I've done a lot of things. I published 14 books. I published the first book on COVID in America. I've done 33 TV episodes, kind of like Trump. I do these reality shows, but I write novels, and they asked me to be in these TV shows. But I was a Rotary Club president, a Tocqueville Society member for United Way for big dollar charitable giving, and a whole bunch of other boards and charities. It's what you would expect, from an executive or somebody wanting to be the second chief executive in the state.
Yeah, right. Definitely. So how does your background experience going to influence your legislative experience or governor experience, lieutenant governor experience, if you win?
It's funny. We all got all these plans, and I did all the debates 4 years ago, and everybody's talking about what they're going to do, and myself included. If you look at my plan, I got 24 points there. But, the lieutenant governor really doesn't have a lot of juice. He's got influence. But, the things when I looked up what does the lieutenant governor do, and I'm certainly going to influence Stacey Garrity because I got a lot of good ideas. But, the lieutenant governor oversees the 50 senators, right? So I say to myself, look at my resume. I've overseen, plenty of staff meetings, committees. I've been on boards, so that falls right in line. The lieutenant governor is in charge of the Pardons Bureau. Okay, I got a degree in criminal justice, and I was head of security. And my resume really, really fits. The lieutenant governor is in charge of any emergencies that take place in the state, like an ice storm, flooding, hurricane. That's what I did at UPS for 3 states. I was the crisis management team director. So really everything that the lieutenant governor does fits exactly into my resume, and I think better than any other candidate. I would really like to see them compare the duties of the lieutenant governor to their work resume. Mine fits perfectly.
Yeah, I would say it does fit perfectly within your reach and your background experience. What are some of the things that you plan? So I read that like you said, your email you sent me about the left going after Trump with affordability. So what is your plan to with the affordability and to get back at them?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. 4 years ago, the whole thing was abortion. The left was trying to nail the Republicans on abortion. So now they got to find something. So they're going after Trump on affordability, affordability. Yeah, but inflation just dropped to 2.7%. So affordability is coming. You got to give Trump a little bit of time. So I say to myself, okay, let's use their affordability and let's go after Shapiro on affordability because this guy is the absolute worst of the worst. I remember as soon as he got in office, the first thing he said was, "How much can I spend?" Think about that. How much can I spend? And that's exactly what he's done for the last 3 years. Uh, he's drained the reserve fund, the rainy day fund. His current budget, that was a battle that they just approved, is spending 3.65 billion more than we take in. Our budget should be no more than 46.5 billion, but it's 50.5 billion because he has to show that he gets shite done. I used a different word from what he said, but he said he gets shite done, right? Spending, overspending, that's like giving your kids the credit card. They can acquire things too, but that's not getting stuff done. But when you look at where the state stands, I saw a projection that in 2 years we're going to be $7 billion spending more than we take in. In 4 years, it'll be 7.6. So, when you got a $50 billion budget and you're spending 7.6 more, you're really looking at a 15% increase in taxes to break even. And when Democrats are in office, you always get tax hikes. And that is absolutely coming. We need a 7% tax hike right now to pay for this budget. But we're pulling money from other areas, the reserve fund, rainy day fund. I'm not raising taxes. As a matter of fact, I'm not only not raising taxes, I'm going to eliminate the fuel tax, which is 2% of the budget. And, I've gone around and people say, well, how are you going to do that? You still got to fix roads. Yeah, we're going to fix the roads. We're going to make it a line item in the budget to do the things that fuel tax was taking care of. But we're eliminating fuel tax. People are not going to pay that because that's a regressive tax. It puts about $600 to $800 back in your pocket. It lowers transportation costs and it reduces inflation. So it's common sense. So people say, well, where are you going to get 2% from? I said, they've raised the spending 40% in the last 5 years. A matter of fact, in 2019, our state budget was $33 billion. We're 50 right now. I mean, that's a little over 50% increase in 6 years. So, what they're doing doesn't add up, but it's how Democrats manage. And we've also had a House Oversight Committee that's supposed to look at the spending. Is it justified? Is it reasonable? They haven't met since 2019. It's 6 or 7 years now. They haven't met to see what they're doing on spending because Democrats only want to spend. The other thing about Shapiro is if you watch him, and I've said this to people, he's got I think 33 of these media people that he hired for $3 million, making them look good on social media. But I've said to people, this guy always goes far left. He goes far left every single time, but he don't talk, like AOC and the Squad and Summer Lee. He's not loudmouth and disrespectful. He's a lawyer, so he plays it. It's almost, I tell people, if you watch baseball, Scott Boras, he will always have the guy run the player become a free agent. He'll take it right to the last minute and get the most money, right? So what does Shapiro do? I'm working with the Republicans. I'm working with them. We're close. We may have something. It gets to the final, thing, and then he goes far left every single time. Every single time he's gone far left and given the progressives exactly what they want. And examples of that would be taking $175 million from cyber schools, getting rid of the counseling centers to talk young girls out of getting abortions. He does it every single time. This guy is far left. And I saw this quote, and it's better worded than I could say. It says Shapiro doesn't use the typical language of the left, but he has generally maintained its most extreme policy positions. And, again, with this state, I just saw this. We're the fifth highest tax state. The other four are northeast of us: New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts. But, we're the gateway to the Northeast. And in some areas, it's so easy to attract businesses and people from the Northeast because, believe it or not, our state tax is actually lower than theirs, and our property taxes are lower than theirs. We nickel and dime you on every other thing, fuel tax, tolls. If you want to start a business, all the fees you have to pay. If you have a snowmobile, a jet ski, a boat, you got to pay all of these fees. But when you add it all together, we're the fifth highest tax state. That's adding real estate, vehicles, property, income tax, sales tax, excise tax, fifth highest tax state. So, and Stacey Garrity has said it right. We're a mediocre state. We're not a successful state. Every time one of these think tanks put out a ranking, they'll put out where you stand on different things, ability to do business, whatever it may be. We always fall between 35 and 42. So we're a bottom 15 state in all these indices. The only thing that we actually do well on is we rank 11th on healthcare. And I think we do have good health care. UPMC, we have excellent health care here. But everything else, we rank, we're a bottom 15 state. So, people need to understand that's where we stand. The Democrats have a huge tax increase coming, has to be because they won't cut their spending. And then in 2028, Shapiro plans to run for president. He's already said it. I don't think he'd settle for vice president this time, even though Kamala said that his ego was so tremendous she couldn't take him as the vice president. But in 2028, when he's running for president, our debt will be $7.27 billion just on our budget. But the state also has another $10 billion in debt that we never pay down. We'll be overspending is the word I should be using. $7.27 billion. And he just spent $1.1 million on upgrading the security of his home. And I'm saying to myself, his private home, because he's supposed to live in the governor's mansion, but it's $279,000 on landscaping. It was a little over 300, I think 329 on security. I don't know what the other $500,000 is. I haven't seen that. But Stacey Garrity said they're going to put a lien on his house because if he thinks he's going to add $1 million, $1.1 million to his home, and then sell it in 2 years if he thinks he's going to win presidency, we want that money back. And that's being investigated right now. That he shouldn't have done it without approval. He went to the ethics committee after the fact, after already saying he's going to do it and contracting. But I mean, 1.1 million. But if only 329,000 is on security cameras and motion sensors and stuff, what's the other $500,000 on? And how do you spend over $250,000 on landscaping? Like, what's he got? Venus flytraps that are going to grab burglars? I mean, what do you do with landscaping? So that's my introduction. How you like that?
It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
and if he loses and he's going to sell his house, that's going to be a shame.
Well, Stacey said they'll put a lien on his home for the $1 million. You can't take $1 million of taxpayers' money and put it into your house and your property. Oh, because I'm governor, I need security. Okay, we'll station 2 state troopers outside your house. That's security. I mean, if it was me, I'd invite them in. You could be in the house as far as I'm concerned. We'll watch TV and, eat dinner. I don't care.
So here's fiscal policy and state economy. The Never Socialist platform, you previously campaigned under a Never Socialist banner. how do you define that context of Pennsylvania state government, and what specific socialist policies currently in place would you prioritize dismantling?
Yeah, well, I put out a Never Socialist newsletter in 2019 to help Trump, and I also took a billboard out that I paid for locally here in Greensburg, and it said Westmoreland Never Socialist. It was all to help him get votes. I paid for that for a year. But when you look, I mean, it's pretty easy when you look at what the Democrats do. you know, uh, they are pushing for socialism. And like I said, and it's really not socialism. I just read a book. It's neo-Marxism. What they're doing is a soft form of Marxism. The way they turn vocabulary against you, the way they don't want police, they don't prosecute crime, and I think Philadelphia is a perfect example about with that. Krasner, they're not prosecuting people and they're letting people off, and that's been what they've done. Flooding the country with illegal immigrants. I was saying to myself, if let's say I went to London on vacation for a couple of weeks, decided to stay 6 months or 6 years, do you think that the UK is going to give me a home and welfare and a pension and food stamps? I'm a tourist. Why would I be entitled to that? But here in America, somehow you're entitled to Social Security and Medicare. I don't get it. But if you just look at the policies of what's been done, in the state, they're mostly not stuff that conservatives want. You've got you got these sanctuary cities. They'd all be gone. Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, it's the Democratic areas, Erie, Harrisburg, Allentown. The sanctuary cities would be all gone in the state. I think we got 16 of them or 12 in the state. They'd be gone. Then you have these centers. I can't think of the name of it, where people go to help them with their ballots, and they're always in the Democrat areas. And people can go 90 days before the election. They go in, they don't allow poll watchers because it's not a poll, and they basically coach and counsel and show the person how to register as a Democrat. I'd love to see the numbers, how many people go to those and register Republican compared to Democrat. I guarantee it's 99% Democrat, and they get them to sign up as Democrats and show them how to fill out their ballots and their mail-in ballots and all of that. I would not allow that. To me, that's not part of the election process to start 3 months early coaching and counseling people, and the state's paying for that because we have a Democrat governor. But there's a lot of stuff. Almost everything that Shapiro wants. It's almost like when Biden got in, he threw out all the executive orders of Trump. Trump gets in, he throws out all the executive orders of Biden. So I would go through. I wouldn't throw them all out, but I would go through what Shapiro has asked for, and the things.
That kind of center reminds me of it was like 2012 maybe, or maybe like when Obama got in and he did that thing with Acorn, where he got everybody on that was on the street to vote Democrat, and that was illegal. But I mean, that's the whole point. Democrats can't play fair. So, but
Yeah. And then they changed the name of that to something else, and that's what they do. They keep having all these non-government organizations, and when they get caught, they just change it to another name. It's like you got a carpentry business, then you go out of business, so you don't have to answer any of the complaints, and you start under a new name.
Yeah. So next one is tax reform. You've advocated for reducing business and taxes and replacing certain fees with slightly higher sales tax. How would you ensure this doesn't disproportionately affect lower income Pennsylvanians?
Yeah, I think you're looking at the wrong thing there. You're looking at what I had said in 2022, but I'm not raising the sales tax. That's an old one that you're looking there. Uh, we're going to get rid of the fuel tax. I would love to, then try to work on, lowering the sales tax, lowering tolls. But I want the General Assembly. They tried to pass 2,800 laws last year. 2,800. That's incredible. 2,800. Do we need 2,800 new laws? I want them to go through these laws and regulations and start rescinding them. There's plenty that didn't do what they thought it would do. There's plenty that are even old from 100 years ago. Let's get rid of those. Let's start building fossil fuel power plants so we can lower our electric rates that are up, I think, 78%. I want to eliminate a lot of the yearly registration fees and the people that process them. I know from working at a company like UPS, when you send out the yearly $20 fee for the snowmobile or the jet ski or whatever it is, it costs half that amount just to process that. So, you want to do it where it's one time, lifetime registration for your boat, your ATV, that type of thing. You got to do things a lot smarter than what they do. Um, I want to eliminate the sales tax exemption on nonprofits if they don't spend 80% on the cure or whatever it is that they do as the nonprofit. And there's very few that spend 80% on the goal. When I was on the board of juvenile diabetes, we were 83%. That's where I got the idea from. But a lot of these nonprofits in the state, and all they are big businesses. They're not nonprofits, and they only spend 60% to do whatever their thing is, and the other 40% goes on salaries, big salaries, balls and banquets, that type of stuff. Um, I said eliminate the fuel tax, freeze seniors' property taxes. I think we got to look at becoming a right to work state. That'll be very controversial, but you'd save a lot of money. I would also take some of the offices out of Harrisburg and put them out in the neighborhoods where they belong. Like maybe the housing department goes to Brownsville. You ever drive through Brownsville? I mean, half the
No.
businesses there are empty, or with the boating and all of that division, and you put them near a lake somewhere. Get them out of Harrisburg. Some of these, you could be helping all these local counties and communities by moving some of these departments out. And that's one of the things I'd like to do.
Hold on. Let me find. What was that?
There's even more. There's even more when I talked about restructuring. We're going to have a Department of State Efficiency, a DOS, like a Doge. It's to be DOS, and but I'm not adding people to that. We're going to take the department heads from each of these groups, and you meet quarterly, and you do a budget review, and you see if everything is being spent properly. But that's what that group from 2019, the House Oversight Committee, was supposed to be doing, and they haven't met. I think about a third of the school administrators should be laid off. I think that the teachers should be allowed to teach. I think that, right now in our schools, 34% of the entire state budget is spent on education. It's $25,000 per student to go to public school. I think that's outrageous. So, we have my son graduated Penn State. Okay, that was 18 years ago, but he was paying $24,000 a year to go to college. And now that's the price to go to high school. But you look at, I asked locally, what does the Greensburg Catholic school here cost? It's $14,000. We don't give the taxpayer any money back to go to a Catholic school, but he'd be saving us $11,000. The cyber schools in general cost less. They have 14 students per class. They have better grades. But yet, what do? We took money away from all the money goes into the teachers union monopoly. So that whole thing needs to be addressed. There's a number of bills out there to address our General Assembly of 253. Should they be part time? Should they be paid part time? Should there be less of them? Some other people have put out bills that there's 150, let's say. I mean, I put a plan out there, but the thing is to get them to look at this. We have way too much representation, or it should be part time. If you want more reps, then they become part time and they're paid part time.
I totally agree. Pennsylvania should become part time.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean, one of the only legislators or general assemblies in the United States right now that's full time state legislators.
yeah. I mean,
Thomas
yeah,
Thomas Jefferson Thomas Jefferson believed in part time legislator, part time citizen.
yeah.
And what better way to represent your constituents than being a citizen yourself? Because once you have that money, once you have that power, and you're in all that time, you don't know what the other people have to go through.
And that's why they'll never downsize themselves.
So yeah,
You know,
you know,
you can
they
put all
want that power. They want power and the
yeah.
money.
Oh, it's a good job. It's not
Yeah.
only salary. You get money for commuting, for food. And guarantee you, I don't know what they get. Let's say they get $50 a day to eat, and they're going to McDonald's for $8.99 and pocketing the rest. You know how that works. But I saw some. I put on my plan. I want to allow independents to vote, and people said to me, I just did a big talk
Yeah.
last week, and I said I want independents to vote, and they said, well, how's that going to work? Oh, they're going to have you. I said, why would you not allow them to vote in the primary? And if you look at it, and this actually helps Republicans. So you allow it's 12% of the state are independent, but 45% of young people are registering independent. They're not registering Democrat and Republican. So you allow them to vote for the 12% to vote for their candidate in the primary. We've allowed them to do that. To me, it's the right thing to do. So then you get to the general election, and right now, 55% of independents vote Democrat, 45% vote Republican. So now they got their candidate there who cannot win with 12% of the vote, but the Democrats don't get that vote. So allowing independents to vote helps Republicans big time. Plus, it's the right thing to do. Why are we not allowing these people to vote because they're independent and they're not Republican or Democrat? To me, it's just not right. I would make
No. I mean,
I
if
would,
they're
again,
allowed to vote in the general election, they should be allowed to vote in the primary election.
that's what I say. But it's funny. A lot of times people don't dig into the numbers like I did. It's 12%. They can't win a race with 12%. And you've done the right thing. But 10% more vote Democrat in November. So that vote will leave the Democrats. It helps Republicans. To me, it makes so much sense. It's almost like Act 77. Why did Republicans push mail-in ballots? I've had big arguments with Kim Ward and my local state rep, Eric Nelson, and George Dunbar, and all these people, and all they say is it was good legislation. Yeah, good for the Democrats, not good for us. It cost Trump the election. He lost a 789,000 vote lead on election night because of mail-in ballots. I don't. Somehow over 1 million ballots came in against him after election day ended at midnight, in 2020. So it makes no sense. We need to get real voter ID, and I would take the um, illegals that we give driver's licenses to, or even people with green cards that work here for a certain amount of time. I would make their driver's license green, so when they come in, you can't vote. You got a green driver's license. It's a green card, let's say, and you can't cheat because you got to come in and show your driver's license or some form of ID. And that, to me, that fixes it. But I got so many good ideas that I think most of these other people have never thought of. I would make Election Day a state holiday. We made Native American. Yeah, we made Native American Day a state holiday, but that falls. It's not a particular day. It's sometime the end of October. So what we do now is we say, okay, November whatever that Tuesday is. November 3rd is Election Day and it's Native American Day, but it's a holiday. Now everybody can go vote. We put both of them on the same day. We don't need to create another holiday. Put them both on the same day.
So the other thing that opens up is that if it's a state holiday, or like you said, that it opens up bigger places for precincts. Maryland does it where the schools are closed. You can use the schools for voting, and it opens up for more voters because then you'll have the juniors and seniors who just turned 18 and legal to vote, and instead of taking off of school or missing school for it, you have a bigger precincts and more people voting. Then you have people, like you said, with the independents as well, who be able to vote. Is that we have, like, for instance, we have a guy running against Smucker. You probably saw Jeff Wilder, who's an independent running. I guess he's independent. He went from Democrat to independent, and from 24 to 26, and he's running independent in the general election. 12%. How's that going to help him in this election? Running as independent. Why is he even running when he knows that Smucker is Trump backed? He's backed by Lancaster County. He's backed by York County. He's been in there. He's got a well-known name. It's a certain loss for him. And I hate to go public this way, but it's just the way it is. I mean, independence in this state is no independent in the general election that I have ever participated in or voted in has ever won in the general election, or a third party candidate, because it's not the percent. The percent's not there.
You can't win with 12. The only thing you can do is hope that some Democrats and Republicans read something about you and don't like their own candidates, and you can pull in. I mean, you'd have to pull in 15% from each of those and get you up around 45%, and maybe that takes enough away. But it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. But I think they should be allowed to vote. Give them. To me, it's a free country. The saying you can't vote in the primary doesn't make any sense to me, and it doesn't hurt. It helps Republicans. It hurts Democrats. Maybe that's why they don't do it.
Yeah, maybe that's why. And I mean, like, once you got the machine behind you, it's a definite loss. So that's about it.
I agree.
So the next question was energy and environment. You expressed skepticism regarding climate change and supported a drill baby drill approach. How would you balance aggressive energy production with the constitutional right of Pennsylvanians to clean air and pure water?
Yeah, well, I don't know that that's a constitutional right to go green. It's almost like the Democrats are trying to make abortion into the Constitution. It's not. I mean, gun rights are in the Constitution, and you can't make any laws against self-defense. But I want clean air and clean water, but we do have that. If you look at the gains that have been made in America and in Pennsylvania, let's say over the last 10 years, the pollution in the world is being done by China mostly and India. It's not the United States. And when you look at what it costs to have wind and solar compared to nuclear or natural gas, wind and solar is 8 times more expensive than nuclear, and it's 4 times more expensive than natural gas. And matter of fact, when I'm in office, I'm going to eliminate the contract for the windmills that delivers diesel fuel that turns them. People don't know that. They get deliveries of diesel fuel that turns the windmills. And what they do with these windmills I don't believe they even work, to be honest with you, because most of the time here in Somerset, I see 1 out of 8 turning. And that's probably turning based on diesel fuel to trick the public. But, I read in the UK, and every now and then these blades come flying off, and nobody really knows how to dispose of them. But in the UK, they take those blades, and I don't know what they're made of, graphene, something. They grind them up and they add them to the blacktop. It makes the blacktop so much stronger. And now I've given you an answer to the potholes. You know, you dismantle these windmills, you take the blades, you grind them up, you add them to the asphalt, you got better asphalt. We don't have potholes anymore. I'm not joking either. That's what they do in England. But it's a lot cheaper to go. Nuclear is really the way.
Wow.
Nuclear is
Um,
the cleanest way to go. But people are afraid of that, you know. And I wouldn't be giving these nuclear plants and these big data centers away. You know, like I haven't looked into really how that's getting paid for at 3 Mile Island. Somebody's putting $1 billion into it. I hope it's not us. I hope it's Microsoft. But you know, what are we charging him for that plant? That thing is worth a lot of money, even if only half of it's running. You know, we're not giving this away because he's adding 500 jobs. That's not worth it. And you know, I want to make sure the people have electricity, so we're not paying these outrageous it's gas and electric bills. But I want to make sure we're not paying outrageous rates because we're not using our natural resources. We're second most in the country as far as fossil fuels go, and the Democrats don't want to let us use it. You know, we should have the cheapest gas. We should have the cheapest the fuel for cars, the cheapest home heating gas.
okay.
Uh, we should have all of that, but we don't. My gas bill to heat my house was 405 last month, and electric was 241. $646 for December, and we got to get through January and February. It's ridiculous, and I'm retired.
Yeah. So the next one is going back to your legislative size. You suggested reducing the size of the Pennsylvania General Assembly, the largest full-time legislator in the U.S. How would you navigate the political difficulty of asking lawmakers to vote to eliminate their own jobs?
Yeah, well, that's why I said when I put on my plan, I said I recommend we do that because I know they're not going to do it, but we have to do something. You know, we already talked about that. There's so it's we're like half the size of the federal government. So I think personally, you know, people want access to their reps, pay them part time, and let's use Zoom calls. You know, what did we do during COVID? These people didn't go to Harrisburg and meet. I'm sure they did a lot of Zoom meetings, cut out a lot of travel. We can cut the whole expense and pay them part time like every other most other states do, because it's an honor to be the state rep. You should be making $119,000 plus all these other benefits. And you know what I threw out was, well, how about linking it to 67 counties? So you link your General Assembly to the 67 state reps, and then there's 17 federal Congress people. So we have 17 senators. Kind of like makes sense to me, right? You use the federal,
Yeah.
the number of counties and the number of Congress people, and that's how you figure it out. You know, and then you end up with 84 people instead of 253. But you know, there's other bills out there to get it down by 100, let's say, instead of mine being the most drastic. But it makes sense what I offered. You know.
Yep. Executive experience. How does your background as UPS executive and MUFON director translate to managing state level bureaucracy and specific duties of the lieutenant governor's office?
Yeah, well, you know, like I said, at UPS, I had 3 states. So you're talking, you know, I should probably look this up. How many people are in Virginia, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania? It's over 20 million people, right? So I had that responsibility of the public and employees we probably had 10,000, probably more than that, employees. So I have always managed large territorial areas, large areas where you can't meet with everybody. Although I spent most of my time, you know, I'd be on the road 3 or 4 days a week, and I'd go out to these facilities, do my job, audit, have staff meetings. I mean, my background fits exactly with especially the lieutenant governor. I think it fits even well with the governor, but you know, I can't break into that because they're endorsing with Stacey Garrity. You know, and I think the lieutenant governor, even if they endorse somebody, the lieutenant governor goes under the radar. Nobody really pays that much attention. And and I think it's a fairer fight there. If there's three of us and one's endorsed by the GOP, I don't think the public cares all that much. And I want them to go to my website where I got 50 reasons not to vote for Shapiro because of how dishonest the man is, and I have this great plan for the state, and I even list a dozen ways that I'm similar to Trump. So if they actually go to my website, vote the number four, vote for Ventre.com, you'll see all the reasons to vote for me. And I think people will. Like I said, I spoke to a group of 80 last week. I hit a grand slam. I picked up 50 people, 30 people from that group and 20 from a group I'm speaking in front of in another couple of weeks. But the person from that group said, I'll get you 20 from the other group. We'll have you come speak, but I'll already have them lined up. So, I'm a good public speaker. I've done television, 33 TV episodes. I've written 14 books, mostly novels. I win debates, and I believe I won the 4 debates 4 years ago that I participated in. Matter of fact, a couple of the other candidates even said to me that, well, you won another one. But, it's about getting the media to cover you. And that's been really hard.
Right.
If your name's not Garrity Mastriano, who dropped out, or Muser, who dropped out, you're not getting any coverage.
Right. So the other one the other one is the role of lieutenant governor. The lieutenant governor presides over the state senate and chairs of the board of pardons. How would your philosophy on law and order influence your decisions on clemency and pardons?
Yeah, I mean, we got to stop letting people out. My belief is you should be able to walk down any street in Pennsylvania at midnight. A female should be able to walk down any street in this state at midnight and not be worried about being assaulted, robbed or raped. And until you got a state like that and cities like that, that's what we have to do. And we have to enforce the laws. And when you break the laws, you're going to pay. You do the crime, you're going to do the time. That's exactly the way it's going to be. And like I said, my background with a degree in criminal justice, being head of security, I've probably been involved in, I don't know how many hundreds of arrests, working for UPS, thousands of terminations, over my 35 years with the company. And I oversaw all of that, so I understand it. But the one thing I'm going to do as lieutenant governor, I want to look at all the people on death row. And very simply, what was the evidence? Now, if and in my mind, it has to be 100% to be on death row. It can't be circumstantial. If it's circumstantial, then I think you go to life imprisonment and you don't get death row. But, if you got witnesses, you got DNA, you got cameras, that type of stuff, and it's 100%, then we have to fulfill what the state's law says. Those people then have to go to death row. Now, maybe we got to change the law that you only get 2 appeals. What they do right now is they just keep appealing it forever and ever. You can have 20 appeals, but maybe we reduce it to 2 or 3 appeals. But I want to read over each file, and I'm good at that. And then I'll make a final determination, recommend it to the governor. These people, I'm not paroling them because they did the crime, but they go to life in prison. And this stack here, they go to death. They're on death row. Well, now we need to finish it.
That's also pretty good. So the other question was, so now we go into election integrity and voting. Voter ID. You have been a vocal proponent of returning to strict voter ID laws beyond ID requirements. What other changes to Pennsylvania's Act 77 mail-in voting would you push for?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we got to go back to voter ID the way it used to be. Like you show your driver's license. If you're an illegal here working or a green card person, your driver's license, because they have driver's license, those are green. It makes so much common sense to me. It's almost incredible. And I said we need to do that. And the thing that I mentioned was satellite offices. That's the offices that are open 90 days, and they basically procure Democrat voters 90 days before the election. We're getting rid of those. And the sanctuary cities, we're getting rid of those. So we're going back to the way it used to be. I read somewhere that Europe years ago tried mail-in ballots, and two-thirds of European countries got rid of the mail-in ballots because of fraud. Even Russia, who's not European, but Russia tried it and they got rid of the mail in ballots because it's too easy to cheat. And so, it's funny. I was up at Erie speaking, and there was a reporter up there. He was from Germany, and he goes, "Well, Germany still has the mail-in ballots." I said, "Yeah, you're one of the 34% that kept it in Europe. 66% got rid of it because of fraud, and there's too much chance of fraud. And there's a reason the Democrats don't clean up the voter rolls. I was never big on the computers, although I've seen plenty of reports where things can change. It can bounce to the other candidate. Okay, but I never hung my hat on that like some people did. I know that Democrats are using these satellite centers. You've got people voting. I think there was 155 over 100 years old in the state that voted. There's people under 18 voting. There was a report last week put out by Election Integrity by state that gave you all the anomalies by state. And you got to look at it and shake your head. People 150 years old and they're voting. Well, you show me the person that's 150 years old in Pennsylvania. There aren't any. The oldest person was 119 that died recently, and they weren't in Pennsylvania. But yeah, we're going to fix that. You have to fix that one.
Trust in elections. Given the polarized climate, what specific steps would you take to ensure that both Republicans and Democrats voters in Pennsylvania have full confidence in the 2026 and 2028 election results?
Yeah, well, I got to get in there first. So that'll be, I don't have anything I can do this year, get in next year. But, like I said, I think if you get rid of the satellite offices, the sanctuary cities, you go back to voter ID. Voter ID fixes it. And we're going to clean the voter rolls. Judicial Watch sued Pennsylvania because there was 800,000 people that needed to be removed off the voter rolls, and they were mostly Democrats. And Democrats are down to about 150,000 lead. They used to have 1.2 million. They're down to 150 over the Republicans now, even though Scott Pressler says it's 52,000. But that number is getting a lot closer and closer. And maybe they have in the past year cleaned up some of the voter rolls because there was 800,000 people. But that's going to get cleaned up. That has to be when people, when people pass away, and whether you use obituaries at a coroner's office or link it to Social Security, whatever, and somebody family member files that the person's deceased, the state needs to be notified and immediately remove them off the voter roll. There are things that go on that are allowed to go on because Democrats cheat. And when I ran 4 years ago, there were 15 of us, and in the Newcastle debate, that was the third debate I participated in, I was the only candidate. The question was, did Joe Biden win legitimately? And the other 14 said he did. And even Stacey Garrity now says that he did, and I disagree with her on that. I disagreed back then. I was the only candidate that said he did not win legitimately, and the place went crazy. I thought they were going to tear the seats out of the ground, and they were screaming and jumping up and down because I was the only candidate to tell them the truth. And unless you have election integrity, I can't say that the elections are real, that those numbers are true. But if you have the election integrity, then the result's the result. And Joe Biden did not get, I think it's 18 million more votes than any other presidential candidate in history. He did not do that in 2020. He got more than Obama, than Hillary, than Trump, than the Clintons, than anybody. And Sleepy Joe in his basement, who never went out and campaigned, could not have done that. It was fraud. And I'll stick with that till the day I die. Joe Biden did not win legitimately. You don't hear all the candidates say.
There's no way that he could have gotten that many votes more than Clinton and Obama.
It's impossible.
So, right. I mean, there's not that many people.
Yeah.
For one.
Great.
So there's some controversial questions on racial controversy and character. In the 2018 Facebook post in 2018, you were removed from your leadership role at Macron after a series of Facebook posts that were widely condemned as racist, including disparaging remarks about Black culture and interracial couples. As a lieutenant governor, you would chair the board of pardons, a role that requires absolute impartiality and a deep understanding of systemic issues. How can Pennsylvanians of color trust you to be fair and arbitrator of justice, given those documented views?
Yeah. Well, first of all, what was said about me was said by the progressives. The story that they put out there is not the whole story. Now, you're going back, it was actually 2017, May of 2017. Someone sent me a post and said, this is white genocide. And I reposted it, and it's in quotes. So I didn't say it, but I blasted it because I was pretty tired of what I was seeing happening to President Trump in 2015, 16, 17, and now. So when I saw that post, I said, that's enough. I've had enough of it. And we have a First Amendment. I'm allowed to put, you call it racist. Well, I don't. I call it white pride. I'm allowed to put a white pride post out there and defend myself and my views. It's covered by the First Amendment. The only thing you can't do on the First Amendment is outright lie or incite a riot. But everything else is allowed. And as the public, I don't know how old you are, but when I grew up, we used to have a saying that I may not agree with what you say, but I'll defend your right to say it. That's what Americans are. So you don't get to do what the progressives do. And Facebook has an unfriend thing there. So they have a mechanism in place. And I unfriend people now. When it's the same person over and over again, I'll just unfriend them from my page. You can't do that once you're elected. You can't take people off your page. But there's a mechanism to do that. And, I saw a quote recently that said, I don't, because of the First Amendment, and I didn't say it, but it's a quote, says that I don't have to explain my right to free speech, but you have to explain where you think you get your right to snuff my right to free speech. Because like I said, if you're not inciting a riot or lying, which opens you up to being sued for libel, let's say, you can say anything in this country that you want. And people can turn around and walk away. They can unfriend you on social media. That's the way you have a free country. You don't have a free country when people are. As a matter of fact, one of the things I put on my plan under social was that no one will be terminated for free speech unless it incites violence. That's common sense. You shouldn't be firing people. I worked for UPS. And unless there was something you signed when you were hired, like athletes, they signed these disclosures. But, you should be able to say, man, I had a tough day at work. My boss was on my back. It's hard work in here. You shouldn't be fired for that. So, that's one of the things I said. Cancel culture. I think people who do cancel culture, that is absolute harassment. I don't know if you've ever been the brunt of cancel culture, them coming to your house, trying to get you fired from groups, volunteer groups, and your job and all of that. I'm not going to allow that. I'm going to push for, laws that say cancel culture, in my mind, is harassment. They have a right to free speech, but not to the extent that you see it today. I think that's a mistake. And I'm going to pass Kyle's law for self-defense, where if you justifiably self-defense and shot yourself, you're not liable for any civil penalties. and torts and all those courtroom fees and stuff. That's Kyle's law. I want to give sheriffs additional powers because we got all these law enforcement people, but sheriffs in PA don't have the type of power that sheriffs in Texas have. In Texas, the sheriff comes onto a crime scene. That's number one person. Everybody else has to move out of the way. Here they just go around delivering subpoenas. you know, uh, Pittsburgh and Philly, they have a little more power, and I think we can look at that and do something to give sheriffs a little more power. And I want to reinstate pro-life counseling centers too, because that's another thing that Shapiro did was he got rid of the pro-life counseling centers, and he's funding Planned Parenthood. Like I said, everything this guy does, he always goes far left, and he gives the progressives what they want. And I'm not giving the progressives what they want. We're going to stick to the laws, the Constitution, and freedom. And I think I'm the best candidate to do that with my background in security and criminal justice. So that's my answer to that.
The other one is the anti-white rhetoric. You have previously characterized shows like Dear White People, anti-white, and part of the white genocide in a state as diverse as Pennsylvania. How does that rhetoric align with a role that is meant to serve all citizens? And do you still believe that white genocide is a legitimate threat facing the Commonwealth?
Well, I think I just answered that. That was all part of that 2017 argument on Facebook. But the country and the state and the world is a different place than what it was 9 years ago. You're going back 9 years to a Facebook post on social media. That's what you're doing here. But I already answered that. My son within those 9 years married a Hispanic woman. I got Hispanic grandkids. I'm going to Puerto Rico to my aunt and uncle's wedding anniversary, 60th wedding anniversary. So, when you're younger, when I was born in America in the 50s, it was a 90% white country. And, even through the 90s, let's say, we were still 70%. But, we're 57% of the population now. Everything has changed. I mean, none of that matters. And the thing another thing I want to do to address that is I don't think we should be tracking people by skin color. I said, to me, it's very offensive on an application, whether it's a college application or a school application, to ask what race you are. Why don't you ask what color eyes do you have, or what color is your hair if you have hair? I want to eliminate any racial tracking unless the federal government requires it. Then state-wise, we're not going to track people based on race. I want to eliminate that, and I think that's the best way to go, because Brazil does that, and you don't have the extent of the racial friction that you have here, which today is mostly caused by the Democrats. And you saw Shapiro's support of BLM and marching with the BLM rioters and against the police, against, he was allowing precincts and patrol cars to get burned down. You'd never see me doing that, but it was a different world that I grew up in. Well, like I said, you're going to a Facebook post. Who cares about Facebook? I really don't, to be honest with you. And Facebook is not a contract that I signed. It's where you go and vent. But that's something from 9 years ago. And my political consultant even said to me, John, that's 9 years ago. That doesn't matter now. And it really doesn't. So, if you look at and I'll tell you one other thing. I'm the only candidate that has a website that recruits Asians and Hispanics to the Republican Party. And somebody said to me, well, why aren't you recruiting blacks? Because you got Blexit run by Owens. I don't remember her first name.
Candace Owens.
Yeah. What's her first name?
Candace.
I thought it was Candace. You know what? I was thinking Candace Bergman. That's why I didn't say her first name. Candace Owens. She runs Blexit, and that's where I got the idea. So I put together this website called Never Socialist USA, and it had two links. One was Hexit for Hispanics, exit with an A for Asians, Dexit for Democrats. I was mimicking what she was doing with Blexit. And then I found out there's actually a site out there for Jews called Jexit. So
Yep.
I used that idea of Blexit and Jexit, and I created Hexit and Exit for Asians and Hispanics. But I'm not going to copy what she did with African Americans because she's already got the group and I don't want to be sued. But there was no group out there to recruit Asians and Hispanics, and I put one out there. And I've got thousands of views on it, and hopefully they've come our way and registered as Republicans. So I mean, you could bring up stuff from 9 years ago. It doesn't concern me because it's old. Joe Biden was best friends with the KKK and the guy down in West Virginia. I don't remember his name anymore. So times change, things change. Like I said, I got Hispanics in my family, and I don't view things the way I did maybe when I was younger. My plan is to put a good plan together for Pennsylvania, for the state, for everyone. Getting rid of the fuel tax, putting $600 to $800 back in everybody's pocket. That's colorblind, right? Everybody benefits from it. Lowering taxes, getting the budget under control, allowing school choice where you can go to a school other than your particular public school. I mean, my plan, when you look at it, is for everyone, and that's what we should be focusing on. That's some stupid Facebook line from 9 years ago. So, what else you got?
So the perennial tag, you saw various offices since 2019, including county commissioner and governor, without success, often failing even to make the ballot due to signature and or paperwork issues. Is this campaign a serious attempt to govern, or is it a platform to keep your name in the headlines for your media projects?
Yeah, keeping your name in the news is what Saccone's doing by saying he's running when he's not. Because he knows the party's going to endorse, and he already said, as soon as they endorse, I'm getting out of it. No, I know that my management skills, I'm off the charts when it comes to the ability to manage. My last three bosses at UPS, they would give me things to do, special projects, and I'd fix them. And I'm a security guy. I'm not an operations person. I'd go and fix them in weeks. And all three of them said the same thing to me. They said, John, no matter what we give you, you turn it to gold. And I'm telling you, I've had friends here say, John, just buy a business, buy a company and run it because you're going to make it profitable. And that's what I do. I look for things I can run for that you can make a difference, like running for governor 4 years ago or lieutenant governor. Running for commissioner locally, that's just to keep busy, let's say. They don't have a lot of power and there's not a lot that they can really do. But, Lincoln ran, it was 8 or 9 times, and then he won. He lost 7 or 8 times. I think it was his 8th time he actually won on. So, every time I've run, I've made more connections. I got so much support now for lieutenant governor from the people I met all around the state, people in Lackawanna, people in Philadelphia, people in Chester and Lancaster. I would have never met those people if I didn't run for governor 4 years ago. I would only know the people here in Westmoreland, Fayette, Allegheny, and Butler, who I do know, and they're helping me. So, I don't see it as a negative. And one newspaper said, perennial candidate. That's how you build a base. That's how you make connections. I've learned every time I've ran, I've learned more. And this is really my 4th major race, twice for commissioner. And I had the last race for commissioner won, but the party sued me 3 times, and they had their committee people at the polls lying to the public, handing out their slate cards saying, use this to vote, when those were endorsed candidates. And there were other candidates not endorsed. So they lied at the polls, or I would be your commissioner right now running for lieutenant governor out of Westmoreland County. And running for governor 4 years ago, I mean, that was a big leap. But I won the debates. 2 of them said that to me. Dave White and Melissa Hart both said to me that, well, you won another one. I won those debates, and my executive skills are far above these other people. And you look at like governors and the chief executive of the state. That's why I ran for it 4 years ago. And lieutenant governor's the second chief executive of the state. And I can do those jobs. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind. So that's why I run, because I can do the job. And my plan, it's off the charts compared to these other people.
The other one is administrative failures. In 2023, a judge had to intervene because of you failed to properly file financial documentation for your local run. If you cannot navigate the basic administrative requirements of a county level campaign, how can you be trusted to oversee the state's board of pardons and its complex legal caseload?
I don't know where you got that, but that didn't happen. So whoever's telling you that, if you found that online, you send it to me, because somebody's telling you these questions now. That never happened. No judge has ever intervened with me filing my financials, running for commissioner would have been at that time. That's absolutely not true. What I filed for was Bill Brett's, the head of the local party, sued me to get me off the ballot. I beat him locally here in court in Greensburg. He sued me a second time, and that went to the appeals court in Harrisburg. 3 judges, I'm assuming 2 Democrat, 1 Republican, looked at it. I won a second time, and that's what took place in 23. And then Bill Brett sued me a third time, and it went to the PA Supreme Court. I won again. So I don't know where you got that information. That's never happened. And matter of fact, when we're off this call, you send me a link and show me that, because that's not true. Somebody's telling you that.
Yeah. All right. The ticket killer question. Garrity versus Ventre. The Republican frontrunner for Governor Stacey Garrity has spent years building a reputation as a disciplined fiscal conservative. Your history is defined by public outbursts and controversial social media rants. If your presence on the ticket costs the GOP the suburbs of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, will you take responsibility for keeping Josh Shapiro in power for another 4 years?
Come on, guy. You're being told this by people, Rick Saccone or some of these other people I've run against here. These last 4 questions to me are nothing but slander. So, I'm not even going to go any further with this, because your questions are pretty one-sided and not true. I'm not running against Stacey Garrity. I initially said I was going to run again for governor, but the party has made it where they endorsed her right off the bat, just like Mastriano said that they jumped to endorse her because he wanted to run again. I switched to lieutenant governor, so I'm not running against Stacey Garrity. She's running against Shapiro because the party will not let anybody else run against her. So, lieutenant governor, like I said, I would be a great lieutenant governor. And I'm going to tell you right now, wherever you got these questions, it's from my opponents. And these, this is a pretty unfair interview, but it's fine. I've answered them all pretty well for you.
So for one last one, it's an honest one. So, presiding over the Senate, the lieutenant governor's primary duty is to preside over the state Senate and break ties. You have never held a legislative office and have a history of public disputes with local officials in Westmoreland County. Can you name a single Republican state senator who has endorsed your ability to manage their chamber, or are you prepared for a situation where your own party's leadership views you as a liability?
Oh, I'm not a liability. Again, you're getting these questions from my opponents, and it's pretty obvious. They're making you look bad. But, so would you say then that Trump never held an elected position and was totally unqualified to run in 2015 and 16, and he would be a very bad president because he's proven himself to be the best president in the history of the recent history of America? I would say you look at the people that are elected, and somebody made a comment to me that the best people don't run for office. And that's exactly what you could see that we have, is that we have people that are really unqualified that are elected. because they're part of the swamp and they get endorsed and and they get pulled along up the ladder. And you get people like Kamala and Tim Walz over in Minnesota. I mean, these screwballs are totally unqualified to be in that type of position. So the only thing I can tell you is, yeah, I would ask how many of them have been a high level executive at a company or owned a large company, and there's very few. So I would turn it around on you. And if you knew me or you spoke to people at UPS, they would tell you that my management skills are incredible. And I would do for Pennsylvania what Trump is doing in the federal government to save money, to downsize, to look at efficiency, to give money back to people, which have eliminated the fuel tax would do. And again, I want to say your last couple of questions here are just given to you by somebody that probably opposed me when I ran for county commissioner, somebody inside the party or Saccone or somebody. But, I've answered them all very well. And I'm going to say this wasn't quite a fair interview, but that's fine. I don't have a problem with it.
So then we'll be honest here. So since it's coming to the end, name at least 3 things that will stand out between you and Saccone.
Name 3 things. What? You broke up there. You broke up.
Name 3 things that will name 3 things that will make you stand out between you and Saccone.
Okay. Well, one thing is, if you look at Rick's, and I'm not really running against Rick, I'm really not. I'm running against Austin Davis. And, when I asked the group last week, I said, name one thing Austin Davis has done. And nobody could name one thing Austin Davis has done. But, as far as Rick goes, I like Rick. We're kind of friends. I'm not sure that we are. But, I've gone to his house. I've seen the thing he put there with the Constitution and stuff. But Rick's announcement was made that if an endorsement is made, he's going to drop out. The other thing he said was he's the type of candidate that Democrats vote for. I mentioned that to a couple of the patriot groups, and they just shook their head and said, I can't imagine that he actually said that. And I said, well, it's in his announcement, I see Rick, I see Kim Ward, I see my state rep and these people that have been there. They were there when the Republicans gave the Democrats mail-in ballots. And I still shake my head. I go to other states on vacation and have conversations, and I say, it was the Republicans in PA who gave Democrats mail-in ballots. And they say, how is that possible? How could that be? I said, well, I'm still asking the same question. The 80% of our elected officials in this state, they're not patriots. They're not conservatives. They don't even realize that they're compromising because they've done it so much. That's why they gave them mail-in ballots. And, I look at, like a couple of years ago when the budget came up, Shapiro's first budget, there were like 20 state reps that didn't vote for it. Leslie Rossi is a good example. She's a great state rep, and I'm friends with her. Those are the patriots in the state. The other 80%, they're not. They're really, they think like Democrats. They go to Harrisburg like Saccone, looking to find common ground and compromise. And that's not what the state needs. We need Christians and conservatives. You see the Templar flag behind me. That's when Christians, stood up for themselves. But we need people that are going to do that and not and stop trying to act like a Democrat. But we have to win the House back. We had the House. We had 23 seats more than the Democrats. They did the state map and stole that from us. But we got the Senate. And, but you have to win the House back. And then when you get a governor, like when Corbett was in place, he had the House and the Senate, but he still didn't get a lot done. He took $1 billion from education and he got very little else done because those long-term Republicans fought him. And they're the problem. They really are. So that's it.
All right. Well, thank you for your time and for coming on. And they can find you at voteforventre.com, right?
Yeah, vote number 4, vote for Ventre.com. You can email me from there, and then you'll see I have a great plan. I have 50 reasons not to vote for Shapiro, my plan, my resume, why I'm similar to Trump, and then on the bottom there's the commissioner stuff. I use the same page, but thanks for having me on.
Yep. Thank you for coming on.
All right, thank you. Bye.
And